Hey, what's going on, everybody? For First We Feast, I'm Sean Evans, and you're watching Hot Ones.
Look at us. Look at us.
Huh?
Who would have thought?
Not me.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.
Oh, we out here now.
This is such a good idea for
I'm
me.
all the way up.
For years, I've watched this show.
About a possible.
I am a real fan of my next guest.
Sean Evans right there!
I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up. Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.
Good mythical morning.
You know what time it is.
It's easy as 1, 2, 3.
Are you serious?
Here, you got it.
Yes!
Hello, little beasties. You ready to do this?
This is gonna be sticky.
Cookie Monster's doing it. Boopity boop boop.
I'm ready to gamify our stupidity.
How did you get through that?
I've eaten a lot of in my time.
Wow, this show's gonna need to be censored.
You think we script this crap? We don't.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. My name is Nekesa Mumbi Moody. I am the co-editor of The Hollywood Reporter, and today I'm joined by Rhett and Link of Good Mythical Morning and Sean Evans from Hot Ones. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us. Yes.
Recently, The Hollywood Reporter ran an op-ed with Neal Mohan, the CEO of YouTube, in which he talked about how important it was to have creators be a part of the Emmy conversation. So I'm wondering, how important was that to hear from Neal, and how important was that to you?
We're one step closer to potentially having one to pull out when somebody comes over to your house to impress them. That seems to be the thing in LA, that everyone is like, do you have an Emmy somewhere hidden in this home? But seriously, it meant a lot to hear it from Neal. You know, we've gotten to know Neal over the past year, spent some time with him. He stopped by the Mythical Studios in Burbank and got to see our operation, and to hear, you know, we've had a great relationship with YouTube for a while. Unlike a lot of other platforms, they really seem to value their creators, understand their creators, and develop really strong connections and relationships with their creators. And just, it's been a great relationship for a long time. But to hear it from him, you know, in The Hollywood Reporter, means that he really believes that, you know, the content that is shaping culture, the shows that are shaping culture, which are happening on YouTube as well, should be recognized by the establishment that is here to award what is shaping culture. Mm-hmm. So it meant a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, the show's on YouTube, but I'm a bit of a traditionalist and grew up on Jimmy Kimmel and Conan O'Brien and David Letterman. So the idea that a show like Hot Ones could be considered and competing against those kinds of institutions, you know, the goal will always be to deliver entertaining, interesting interviews for our audience. But as far as distinctions go, it's hard for me to think of one that would be more important than that. And it's been a long time in the making, you know, doing the show for 10 years now, almost 10 years now. And as silly as Hot Ones is on paper, we do take it very seriously. So it's just a culmination of a lot of hard work, and yes, profoundly important personally.
Yeah, and I think Hot Ones deserves one, as long as they're not in our category.
And we're not
good. So
we're not
we're good on that front. But yeah, I just echo what Sean said. We do something very silly that we take very seriously, and Emmys are the standard bearer that we want to achieve. And we create televisual content. you know, and it just happens to be on a different platform that actually the viewer experience is becoming the exact same, whether you're accessing YouTube TV, or any other streamer or linear television channel. It's the same experience from the audience perspective, and our standards in production are basically the same. So from their experience, it's no different. We know it's all converging, right?
Right, exactly. Sean, I want to ask you a couple questions. I noticed that this week one of your guests is going to be Will Smith, another top A-list person, and I think it goes to show like how coveted spot on Hot Ones has become. And I wanted you to kind of take us through the journey of how that came to be. I mean, I think your first guest was Tony Yayo, which is still good, you know, G-Unit.
Yes,
But,
yeah.
when do you think that was a turning point that it became the place where people had to come and talk?
Well, you know, you're right. It was a long journey to kind of get to that spot, especially when I think about how we'd pitch guests early on, and now we have so much that's incoming. You know what I mean? Which is such a dream come true. And I never thought that would happen with a show like Hot Ones. I thought we'd always be trying to convince people. But I do look back and see certain tentpole episodes that I do think opened up new categories and took us up to another level. And we used to joke all the time about how the show wasn't a big hit at first and how I was eating a lot of spicy food and no one cared at all. You know, and I used to tell Chris, it would be like professional wrestlers, you know, doing Legion Hall shows and like taking elbow drops from the top rope on like a Tuesday to an audience of like 50 people. So we used to joke about that all the time. But the Key and Peele episode was the first episode that was like a big view monster and kind of exposed the show to a wider audience. I think Kevin Hart pretty early on in the evolution of the show, that opened up a category. I think Charlize Theron was one of the most important episodes that we ever shot. And a lot of times these were people who were kind of maybe didn't read the fine print on their press day and all of a sudden found themselves in front of a bald guy with his lineup of wings. But then we call it like a shoulder drop. You know, you see them get comfortable and engage with the interview. And what is on paper, this kind of goofball exhibition, is actually a rather thoughtful career spanning interview that's then produced and polished and delivered in a way that's highly interesting and highly watchable. And I think that happens over and over and over again. And then people start to see the opportunity that it has. And there aren't that many shows these days where, you know, if you have a book coming out or you have a movie coming out or you have a show that you want people to watch, there's not that many shows that break through. So I think that's the value proposition that we began to add, but that took a long time to get there. And now that the thing's up and running, it's just trying to keep up with that. But you're right. Like, I never for 1 second take for granted the guests that we've had come in the doors over these years and take on the wings of death. And I think it's just a momentum thing, you know, like once you have this proof of concept, once people see that, you know, we're not making fun of you with the wings, you know, we're knocking you off a pedestal, but it's this very human experience. I think it's just, we accidentally invented that what's it like to have a beer with this person show. And I think for a lot of celebrities, even at the A-list, that's an interesting proposition for them.
I think you hit on something that I wanted to talk about, as far as that's also a very thoughtful show, and you're asking questions that are career spanning. And when some of the things that we see that go viral are people like fanning themselves like, oh my God, this is so hot. But at the same time, you do talk about really key subjects to the star and really thoughtful things. Can you talk a little bit about what you were aiming for as far as, you know, shows that you grew up admiring?
Yeah, I mean, I think in part, you know, when you're sitting down and doing an interview, there's nothing natural about it. You know, you're creating this rhythm, this chemistry, this sense of trust between two people who've never met before. And then you're doing it in this ridiculous context where it's on a TV show. You know, nothing about that should be real. But when you do connect to someone on a human level, you see like a real human reaction to those sorts of things. And then that pierces through everything that should be artificial about it. So that's what I always thought was important, was to, you know, reach that person on an emotional level, but also to keep them engaged, because I have this show where, okay, the next wing is the bomb beyond insanity. You know, like, how are you going to get an A-list star, an Academy Award winning movie star to stay engaged with the show? They have to, on some level, enjoy the experience. So we call it the most comfortable, least comfortable interview show. And that's kind of what we try to write to. But to take you back to like some of the shows that I grew up on, it's not so much that those shows influenced me, but it was the feeling that they gave me. You know, like, shows were important to me as a means of escape. And I remember what it was like to listen to Loveline every night, or to watch Letterman on the couch with my dad, and how these shows were kind of in the orbit of my life, but my life was also in the orbit of these shows, you know, especially during, you know, some tough times in my life. And so I think about who am I making the show for? It's like the person who's working in a cubicle, and on Thursday they watch Hot Ones on their lunch break, and they know they just have another half shift Friday, and then it's the weekend. So it becomes this sort of Pavlovian reward center that you get purely out of escaping into this show. And I remember what that feeling was like for me. So I'm just trying to carry that on, try to drop those seeds the same way that they were dropped for me. So that's always the feeling that I'm chasing, and the way those shows that were so influential to me, the way that they informed that approach, at least as far as I take it.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. I want to ask Rhett and Link, like, when you're making your show, who do you see as your audience? Like, who are you making it for? You guys, I think, have such a varied audience.
Well, our audience, first and foremost, is each other. You know, over the 12 years or so of doing the show, it's from the beginning, we sat behind one desk. Two guys don't sit behind one desk unless it's like a weekend update desk. I think we were influenced by that a little bit. And by the way, to see SNL start to parody different creators and their shows, because everybody, it's a part of the culture and the zeitgeist, is very validating. And I think is an informative part of where we're at in terms of being a part of these conversations. I think that Rhett and I, you know, we talk to each other, we capture the authenticity of our friendship while we're doing whatever we're doing Monday through Friday. And we set up the show from the beginning to have this intimacy with, like, where the camera is placed, to have a connection with a singular audience member instead of a studio audience full of people, that you happen to be in this more voyeuristic, along for the ride experience. For us, it's very direct, it's very connecting. You are the third person in our friendship, and it's very loose. It's rarely edited, so you get this honest experience that draws you in, and so our audience is pretty broad. You know, people see our show as a source of comfort because they can count on it 5 days a week for over a decade, and they know what they're going to get, and they know that we're being ourselves, and that we're going to bring something that's highly produced but extremely honest at the same time. Right? You can talk more about the specifics of the audience.
Yeah, well, I think that it is all about that connection, that personal connection. And this is really on our minds right now because we're on tour with a Good Mythical tour right now. That's why we're in different places, because I'm in Atlanta getting ready for the next show. Link had to fly back for something in LA. But we've been meeting, you know, our fans out on the road and in these meet and greets where we get to spend quality time with individual people and, you know, couples, families. And to hear the way that people experience the show, we always ask them, like, you guys watch together? And a lot of people are like, yeah, we watch it every night together. We eat dinner and then we sit down and we watch the show together. Or it's like, she watches it when she wakes up and then we talk about it when we get home and I watch it. And the different routines that people have. And that was always our intention from the very beginning. If you go back to that very first episode, we had absolutely no idea what Good Mythical Morning was going to become. And it was very much a small side project at the time. We talked about it like it was something we wanted the audience member to make a part of their daily routine. Wherever you feel it, you know, wherever you put that Good Mythical Morning, if it is in the morning, if it's in the afternoon, if it's your lunch break, if it's at night, if you wait until Friday and you watch all 5 episodes together, some people do that. We wanted it to be there, to be reliable, to come out at the same time every day, in the way that traditional shows work, right? There are a lot of content creators that when they get done with something, they put it up. And that's fine. But we're thinking so much about the audience experience that we wanted it to be something that was reliable, dependable, that you could count on. And so much so that people call it, there's a whole new genre of comfort viewing that people keep talking about. They take comfort in this routine that they have around this content. And honestly, it's something we kind of stumbled into because we are making something that there's so much of. And if you want to use it for comfort, there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Yeah, and if you want to, use traditional measurements for audience, if you look at the 18 to 34 age range, that's our largest demographic. And when you compare the numbers of Good Mythical Morning to the other late night shows, in that 18 to 34 range, our viewership is much greater than those, which once we found that out, that kind of blew us out of the water. I believe it's even if you combine their numbers, our viewership in the 18 to 34 is greater. Which is we'll take it.
I'd like to ask all of you, how did your show, do you feel like, change, and how did you continue to morph it after it became, instead of like maybe a side project or a show that maybe wasn't getting as much attention to when it blew up? Like, how did it change? How did you change along with the success of the show?
I think for me, when we first started the show, we thought of Hot Ones. Maybe we'd put out 4 episodes a year and it'd be kind of this like internet Super Bowl event. And that was kind of as big as we dreamed for it. But then there was this cult audience that kept showing up just episode after episode after episode. So you started to think about the long game on that, like how can you continue to scratch that itch for your audience? Well, you can't just do it on, the stunt of like wings alone. So you're going to have to include in that what is by itself like an unimpeachably good interview show, and then combine that with this novel hook that has to do with the wings. And that was 100% motivated by this audience that we had growing. It was just like, we need to make this show good for them and a different viewer experience every time. Well, how are you going to do that? You have varied guests, and then you give them the space to have each viewer experience an extension of that guest's personality. But there was never like a paradigm shifting moment or like a time where it like shifted in a real way. It just kind of, Hot Ones is a show that has just gotten a little bit bigger this week than it was the last week. And it's been this kind of gradual thing over time. I mentioned some of the tentpole episodes before, but mostly it was just kind of like the day in, day out, like turning up the tide. And with Hot Ones, sometimes it seems like one long fever dream, and then I have to come up for air and be like, wow, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years that we've been doing this show. But the motivation definitely comes from the audience. And that's what I kind of appreciate about the very transparent relationship between audience and show that you get on YouTube, because you also have that focus group in the comment section that's showing up and almost treating this like a communal town square where they're discussing every episode in real time. And, I'm not like in the comments a lot, but I can see kind of what floats to the top. And in that, you have a lot of valuable feedback. And I think that that's why there's such a strong connection between the audience and the show, because they can see themselves reflected back in the show. So as far as like, oh, which guest should we feature? Like whatever, a lot of that is informed by just this two-way conversation that you have with the audience. So I think it was all of those things together that made these kind of small tweaks, but I also take a great deal of pride in that Hot Ones has kind of been like the ivy on the walls of Wrigley Field and has been mostly unchanged. It's, hey, what's going on, everybody? For First We Feast, I'm Sean Evans. Here's the guest. Here's what you know them from. We're going to do this interview. And then at the end, we're going to dab a wing, this camera, let the people know what you have going on in your life. And nothing about that has changed basically since the beginning. So small tweaks along the way, but mostly unchanged. And I'd like to keep it that way as long as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for us, yeah, Sean is totally right. And it mirrors our experience that the audience feedback is instantaneous. And we structured our production cycles so that we could respond as quickly as possible to the things that were working. Oh, we introduced this character. People loved her. So let's bring her back. Let's bring her back more often. Let's start to introduce a storyline there. From the beginning, our show was 5 days a week, and we were talking to our audience about, like Rhett said, making it a part of your lives and making it a part of your daily routine. But it evolved a lot over a decade plus. I think one of the main ways was in terms of production quality. You know, there's two things going on. We want to create a television level production experience for our audience to take in, right? And so we've reinvested with the success of Good Mythical Morning. We've reinvested in the show. You know, we have a team of writers, we have a team of producers. Beyond that, the show has been successful enough that we've been able to invest in our own studio and then launch other shows. We spun off entirely new channels, like Mythical Kitchen is a food-based channel that spun off of our chef on Good Mythical Morning, making food behind the scenes. So we have a team of over 100 people working in our studio in Burbank, and that evolution has always found its way back on screen. I think the thing that goes along with that is you learn how to format episodes so that they draw in an audience. No episode is any better than, unfortunately for us, the title and thumbnail. You know, are we making a promise that when you click, we're going to deliver on that promise every single day? And so we earn the trust, and we also earn new audience because we're drawing them in that way. We have guests, but we don't have guests are not the main driver of audience growth for us. It's quality, consistency, connection, and you know, how much Rhett and I either love or hate each other on a given episode.
And I would say, to add to that, we discovered something that Sean knew from the beginning, which is the power of food. Good Mythical Morning did not start as a show where we were doing taste tests. It was simply conversational. And the first time we ever started tasting like snacks from Walmart or something, and all of a sudden the views popped up to this new level, we're like, oh, people, everybody eats, right? And everybody has an opinion. Everybody wants to see what somebody thinks about fast food, or can something new be invented? So we have found a lot of different ways to incorporate food that, keeps it innovative without, retreading the same ground, and not doing exclusively food, but it's about half of the episodes at this point. So I would say that finding out that was something that people wanted to see, and trying to find ways for it to remain interesting to us and the audience who stuck around for a decade has been something we've been focusing on.
How do you, for yourselves, keep it still exciting and fresh after all of you guys have been going for about more than a decade, probably, or about a decade? What kind of keeps the magic?
For us, we shifted to the show not being something that we've planned out, but something that we've handed over to our team to produce so that the show happens to us. Now, all of our competitions, all of our reactions, all of our taste tests, it's completely honest. There's no way around it because we know so little going into it. And that's a testimony to just building a highly professional team that creates each episode. I mean, we'll sit down behind a desk, and then they'll tell us what the episode is about.
That provides, I guess, some excitement and makes it different. But did you ever feel like, oh my God, I want more control, or I should know what's going to be happening?
Well, so I will say that the reality is that if it's a new format, like if it's something that is completely new, we have a writers meeting every month where we hear all the pitches for everything new, and we are in that, we're leading that and responding and shaping those ideas. So there's never something that's like, oh, I didn't even know that this type of episode could ever happen. Like we know what's going to happen, but
I guess sometimes I don't listen in that meeting though.
Yeah, that is true. That's
Like
very. That's why there's two of us. But one of the things that happens is iteration within a format, and those iterations are the things that we want to be surprised by. So sometimes it'll be, oh, if you do Will It Taco, you can do Will It Hamburger, right? That's easy. But sometimes it will be taking something that we have done, and they know that it's enough like something that we have done in the past that we're going to approve it, but we still have that element of surprise. So I would say that we are definitely involved in sort of shaping the creative holistically on the show, but trying to maintain that sense of surprise and true experience and reaction.
For me, the thing that keeps it fresh is that I make sure that I never become too jaded to realize what an awesome opportunity and moment that I have. You know, like I think it's a good thing that I didn't experience any success in my life until, you know, after my 30th birthday. You know, I think that was good to have a whole sort of like work experience in a job that was not a chicken wing talk show host, for me to appreciate the joy of being a chicken wing talk show host, no matter how hot the wings are. You know, you go from interviewing Chris Hemsworth, and in the week leading up to it, rifling through the filmography, on to Lewis Hamilton, downloading everything I can about F1 and trying to, parse his career in a way that'll be entertaining in the interview. And then go on to Will Smith, who as a child of the 90s is one of the top icons in my life. So I never lose track of that. You know, I never let myself become too jaded to realize how amazing this is, that I can just have a TV show. You know, it's like what you dream of. So I fully appreciate and understand that in a lot of ways, this crazy ride has allowed me to live out my dreams. And yes, there are times that I'd rather be on a beach rather than, you know, hopping on the fifth plane of the week and eating the bomb beyond insanity some 350 times over the last however many years. But at the end of the day, I never, ever lose sight of it. And it's an amazing thing that you can do something like a show and be so fulfilled creatively and get to share the things that you make with millions and millions of people. And I think about, you know, when we dropped that Conan episode, that millions of people laughed that day watching a video that we made. And that's like as close as any person walking the earth can have to a superpower, you know, to have that chain reaction of laughter all over the world. So that's the thing that I just try to keep in my brain when the sort of day in and day out slog of like the time consuming work. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and how cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I'll add too is that sometimes, you know, we lose perspective because we've been doing this for so long. But when you take a look at a week, and if I were to just communicate to just someone on the street, these are the things that I did this week in my life. Like, I got hooked up to a wedgie machine and played hangman. I ate a cheesecake that had beef bile in it. You know, I did a series of nursery rhyme raps with Post Malone. It would be like, this is the most amazing week I've ever heard about. And I was like, that was just a week of Good Mythical Morning. So we do lose perspective on the number of weird sort of novel experiences that we have in a given week. So that's one thing that keeps it exciting, is that we never know how crazy it's going to get.
I am so jaded. My toilet flushes itself. It's wild. It's wild.
I'm curious, what are the ideal guests, like the guests you haven't had yet that you're just like, oh my God, this would be the dream for each one of you?
Well, one thing, you know, for us, because we have, like Link was saying, is we don't always do guests. So we're doing probably a couple a month at this point. The really cool thing that has started happening is, you know, just in this past year, we've had just two great examples of this: Conan Gray and Lizzie McAlpine. So two musicians that are really popping off, that are really connecting, who have been fans of the show since they were kids and have watched the show as they grew up and have always wanted to be on the show. Yeah. And then when they show up and they say that it's been a dream of mine to be on Good Mythical Morning because I watched as a kid, it's a surreal experience, first of all. But like with Lizzie McAlpine, we brought up her tweets when she was a guest, right when she was getting started, before she had really blown up. she was tweeting, career goal to be on Good Mythical Morning.
Wow.
And so we brought those tweets up and made her read them aloud on the show. But I think for us, those have become the most fulfilling experiences when you find out that somebody's a fan. I mentioned Post Malone a second ago. Like, we've become friends with him. He watches the show on a regular basis. And, you hear that when people show up, you're like, oh, yeah, their people told them to, showed them a couple episodes or something like that. But then when you realize, oh, no, they are a mythical beast. They watched the show. They made it part of their daily routine. And now they get to be in it. That's super fulfilling for us. So I think that's the thing I look forward to is the surprise people that, oh, you actually watch the show on a regular basis and now you're here.
My dad was on the show a few times, and then we spun off a podcast with the two of us because it was such a good experience. And I think that's one of the unexpected things, is that I was able to give my dad a level of fame so he can go up to strangers and say, "Do you know who I am?"
Yeah, and I that's always my favorite thing too. I remember the first guest that actually knew my name was like T-Pain, like 25 episodes in or something, coming in. I remember that moment, and now it just happens so regularly. But yeah, and that's like my favorite thing too. Or like when Jack Harlow was like, yeah, I've been watching you since I was like, it makes you feel old or whatever. But it's like,
right.
Yeah, and it's nice because I'm like, oh, I don't have to convince you to trust this show now, which is always like a nice thing too. For Hot Ones, like our fans are very vocal about the people they want on the show. I remember before we had Gordon Ramsay on, I almost felt bad for every guest that we had before that, because we'd be like, this week on Hot Ones, and all the comments would be like, where's Gordon Ramsay? It was just this albatross like growing around our necks. So we like had to get him on the show in order to just keep doing the show at one point. And then I thought once we caught that white whale that we wouldn't have to we'd be done with it. But of course it continues. I think like Keanu Reeves is probably our new Gordon Ramsay, where it gets requested all the time. And I like to catch those whales in order to just like chill people out for a little bit, or so that they can move on to the next one. And then sometimes we always joke that like 50 Cent is kind of made in a lab for Hot Ones. So he's a guest of ours. And and then otherwise though, I just like the new experience of like walking a mile in someone else's shoes, trying to get their story into some sort of shape in your head, and then try to execute against that once you sit in the room with them. So I'm kind of like, there's some that I'd like to get just to get some people off my back, but otherwise I kind of embrace the new challenge every time.
Okay. And last question, if you get the nomination or maybe even a trophy, what will that mean?
I think it'd be the ultimate, like I said, I'm a traditionalist. I grew up on Letterman and Conan and Jimmy and those kinds of shows. To compete against those institutions, I think would be the most important distinction we've ever had. The goal will always be just good interviews with interesting people. That'll always be the goal, and that's always the thing that I'm chasing. But I'd be lying if I said that wouldn't mean a lot to me personally, a lot to us at Hot Ones.
Yeah, it would mean a huge amount, not only to me and to Rhett, I'm sure, but also to our team. We've built a completely independent studio in Burbank. We're doing our version of television, and so it's an honor to be a part of the conversation, with, like Sean said, names that we respect and that we compare ourselves to in terms of the level that we want to be at and the experience we want to give to our audience. YouTube has given this opportunity to just by existing the way that it does, of having complete creative freedom. And, we could go in so many different directions, but we have a strong relationship with our audience. And that's the thing that matters most. But I would be lying if I said that an Emmy nod wouldn't be huge for us, because it absolutely would.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately about being seen and understood in the way that you see and understand yourself, right? Which we don't necessarily have to get into the psychological realities of what that means and whether or not I should talk to my therapist about that. But I think that there is when you come from YouTube and the threshold, you know, the barrier to entry is you just have to have a camera and a web connection. And so a kid in his bedroom can essentially compete with you directly. I think that there is a bit of a stigma that still hangs around everything that's made on YouTube because of that barrier to entry. But that barrier to entry is why these shows exist. It created the ecosystem for ideas like Hot Ones and Good Mythical Morning to be created and to flourish in this place where the people that you see on screen having this, you know, creating this experience are the ones who are running the team behind the scenes, right? It's not just somebody who was just taken and plucked from a LA casting room and put into this position, but you're connecting directly with the creator of that content. And that's something really special that can only happen in this arena. And so I think that winning an Emmy essentially is saying, hey, we recognize that you guys are connecting with and defining culture in the same way that these other shows have been doing for years. And I do think for us and for our team, anybody who's been doing what we've been doing for a long time, and we talk to our team about this all the time, like, how do you talk to your parents about what we do? And people still just don't get it. They don't understand what it is that we're making. Why does it require so many people? Why is it a studio? Why are you making it like this? Can't you just do this with a phone in your bedroom? But then when they come in, they actually see the facility that we have and see why we make the decisions that we make in order to make the content that we make. They get it. And it just feels very validating. And I think an Emmy is a way to sort of formally recognize that for us and our team.
And I'll add one more thing is it's just, you know, it's kind of inevitable anyway. You know, you can talk about the way that consumer behaviors change and how, you know, I watch YouTube on this TV, like through the app as I would with Netflix or Max or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, that's one thing. And then it's like, well, where's the next great showrunner going to come from? Where's the next great sitcom idea going to come from? Where's the next great talk show host or host going to come from? You know what I mean? Like it's going to start on YouTube anyway in the future. These things will continue to turn. And then also too, when you look at the opportunity, the chance to be your own studio, to be your own producer, to not have to share that cut with the net, you know, like that's where the fertile ground is right now. And I think that that's where the future is naturally. So it's a conversation that, or it's just something that these institutions will have to confront at some point. And selfishly, I'd say now's as good a time as any.
Right. That's right.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Best of luck and enjoy this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.